All right, welcome everybody. This is It's iBugs Live for April 27th, 2023. And we are iBug, and we're going to go over some fun stuff tonight, talking about cooking a meal. But I won't steal anybody's thunder because I'm very looking forward to this. But real quick announcements that apply to this weekend. Tomorrow we have the iBug Night at the Virtual Movies. We're going to be watching All Quiet on the Western Front from 2022. So join us on this same Zoom call at 8 p.m., 7:30 for social time. And then on Saturday, we have the Apple Workshop. Got some cool demos and some cool presenters. So come check that out at 2 o'clock on Saturday. Same Zoom conference line. Also visit our website for all the other information about our other services. We are doing the tech shopping spree for $10, opportunity to win $500 or a tech store of your choice. So check that out. The drawing will be on May 20th. With that, we're going to quickly go around. We'd like to know who's here with us. So quickly, we're going to say who you are and where you're from. Who'd like to go?
Gloria from Houston.
Hey, Miss Gloria, welcome.
Thank you.
Elisa in Porter, Texas.
Welcome.
This is Herbie in Houston.
Herbie, welcome.
Bridget, Atlanta.
Hello, Miss Bridget.
Hello.
Liz, Fort Worth.
Hello, Liz.
Jody in New Hampshire.
Hey, Jody.
Hi again, Sonia.
Janet in Colorado.
Welcome. Anybody else?
Ned from Kyle, Texas.
Hello, sir.
This is
Michael, welcome. Who else?
This is Gail. Can you hear me?
Hey, Gail, welcome.
Hi. Got it unmuted finally. Thank you.
All right. Welcome. Anybody else didn't get to say hi? All right. Well, with that, we are going to hand it over to our It's iBugs Live facilitator, our very own George Batiste. George?
Good afternoon or evening, everybody. Welcome to another chapter of It's iBugs Life. And look like we almost have representation from all of the time zones in the United States. We got Colorado, which is in mountain. Of course, we dominate the central. And then we got Jody in New Hampshire, who's on the East Coast. Just don't have nobody on the Pacific time zone or Hawaii or Alaska. But that's okay. They may come later or they may hear about it later in a different time zone. That does not matter because it won't be live. Hope you guys have come with your appetites and your interest because we are going to be learning how to prepare another basic dish. I promise you guys, I know I've been promising you guys for probably about a year or more about I'm going to do a meeting where we're going to prepare gumbo, but I haven't done it yet. So I got to do it first before I actually host a class on it, which is going to be doing Zoom because I have been talking to, God bless you, several people. And I think I have an imaginative thought of how to put that thing together. So that's going to be coming up soon, but that's neither here nor there. Today, and this shouldn't be too difficult, the meal we're going to be preparing this evening. And I'm not going to give it away. We have a special guest today. Well, he's not a stranger to those of you who has been in part of iBug meetings before, but he is, I believe this is the first time, maybe the second time I've had him to assist me with doing this particular iBug platform where we do about things that you can do at the home from the blind perspective and details like that, where we're going to fix things, where we're going to make things, where we're going to repair things and things, what have you. So today we're going to have a regular iBug facilitator on multiple platforms. I think I've heard one time he has spent time, or maybe he's from the UK, but I know he also spent time on the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. But now he's here in the good old city of Houston. I want to introduce to you guys Herbie. Herbie is going to be demonstrating or giving tips on how to prepare a meatloaf with all of the trimmings. So, Herbie, folks are hungry. I'm going to be quiet for a moment and let you take the floor.
All right, thank you, George. Well, I'm going to do one better than give you all tips. I'm actually going to make it live right here on the call, and as we go along, I will create gaps where you all can ask questions. So, first of all, yes, I am both from the UK and have spent time in the UK. And my mom's side of the family is from the UK, and I did live over there more so because of my dad being in the military than because of my family. So I do have some British roots. But this is very much an American meal. Meatloaf, garlic mashed potatoes, and green beans. So, what you need to know about me first in regards to this, I have been doing a cooking show for the ACB community since May of 2021, and it occurs every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. I also have some of those calls uploaded to my YouTube channel, and you can hear a lot more things that I cook over there. Even if, whatever you get out of this call today, even if you're not, let's say, a big fan of meatloaf, for instance, you're going to learn, I think, a lot of things from this call, just from, like with the mashed potatoes, how to boil water, what we're going to do to put things in and out of the oven. So I want you to really focus on not just the dish that we're making, but the techniques, how it affects not just the dish, but what can be applied to any other dish that you are trying to make as well. And my goal with teaching cooking is to try to encourage people who are blind that, hey, you can do it without any sighted help. It's always a good idea if you're able to get any kind of practice for sure, but it can be done. And with that, we're going to get started with the meatloaf. So there's two principal things we're going to do before we do anything else, and that is preheat the oven and wash hands. Mine is an old-fashioned oven. It has the dial. I much prefer that because if I ever have any kind of smart technology in the kitchen, I want something that, and we are hearing a talking watch or something in the background. If I have any kind of smart technology in the kitchen, I want to be able to control it physically first and have the internet be a backup option. And this is because, well, I'll give you a real-life example of where this could have been a problem. Snowstorm in Houston last year. We lost internet but did not lose electricity. So if I had smart tech that I could only talk to, we would have had problems. But because we didn't have internet, I mean, that was made life hard enough as it was. But, we were still able to eat because I was able to cook the food because of my old-fashioned oven with knobs and no A-ladies or anything like that. So now I'm going to wash my hands, as you are hearing. This is always a good idea because you're going to be messing around with food, and also doubly important because we're going to be messing with raw meat. So I'm just washing my hands. I do it with scalding hot water because I can tolerate that, and that can kill more germs. So let's start by talking about the meat. I'm using ground beef, and this calls for 2 pounds ground beef. So we'll briefly go over the ingredients. We're going to do the meatloaf, and then we're going to do the potatoes and green beans. So the meatloaf calls for 2 pounds ground beef. It calls for about a 1/4 cup of onions, 2 heels of bread or any kind of bread crumbled up, 2 eggs, about a 1/3 cup of ketchup. I tend to do a little bit more like a 1/2 cup because of flavor. And and then some salt and pepper, and you can also add an additional allspice. So, and of course, you can substitute the meat with whatever you want. If you want to use ground turkey, by all means, you can do that. You could do ground pork or like Italian sausage. That would make for a very interesting meatloaf, I'm sure. Ground chicken. You could even use soy meat substitutes if you wanted, or like I'm sure you could use mushrooms. So, depending on your dietary requirements.
Yeah.
All right.
We can hear you, Alyssa. Need to go on mute.
We're getting some background noise here. So, if you want to remain unmuted, that's fine, but I'm hearing a lot of headphone rattling, a lot of people talking. So, anyway,
Herbie, I'm sorry. I'm assuming the onions are chopped up, correct?
okay, great question. In my case, they are. It calls for the onions to be chopped. I was going to talk about that when we got to the onions, but in this
my
case,
bad.
they are pre-chopped. That's okay. I'm getting to everything, I promise. But you're all eager and you're all starving, so I don't blame you. So the first thing I'm going to do is just lightly spray the pan with a little bit of Pam. It does help to keep the meatloaf from sticking. I don't want to overdo it because it's the meat is going to generate its own grease, except my Pam has suddenly walked away. Oh, there it is. So let's describe the Pam container first of all. It is, I realize it's not the most environmentally friendly, but it's one of the aerosol things. It comes in a long canister with a plastic lid. It is a smaller can than like your, there are similar spray cans that would have like pest control thing, like bug spray and oven cleaners and things like that. The nozzle on them is a lot different, and they're usually protected by those canisters are larger and they have sides on them. The Pam, I just know it's Pam automatically by feel because it's a smaller cylindrical container. It has the smaller plastic lid. I just take off and there's the little nozzle, and I can just spray lightly once and kind of use my hand to go around. Let's spray one more time. And that's it for the Pam, and I'll put the lid on. I'll make sure it's somewhere far away from the stove because that could be a potential fire hazard if it was too close to the stove. Now the meat. Depending on the leanness of your meat will depend on the packaging. So I like to get meat with a little bit more grease because I think it does better for the flavor, but you can go between roughly 73% and 90% lean ground beef. The 73% is really more ideal for burgers and things, and those tend to come more in those tubes. And you can usually get your packaging, by the way, in 1 or 3 pounds. I like to get 1 pound packaging just because most recipes generally call for 2 pounds of ground beef or 1 pound. They don't call for 3 pounds, and I do not have an easy way of figuring out what is a pound from a humongous 3 pound package of meat. So I'd rather just get it already in the 1 pound packages. And that way I know each package is a pound, it's pre-measured, and I'm done with it. I've got the 80% lean ground beef, so this comes in a rectangular container that is a styrofoam. You can hear the tray sound, and it has plastic wrap all over it, and I can tell just by feeling that it is ground beef. I don't have any other ground meat, so if you get other ground meats besides ground beef at the same time, it could be a little bit trickier, though in my experience, the ground turkey comes in a plastic tray rather than a styrofoam tray, so that is how you would tell the difference with that. But the meat comes in a plastic tray with the saran wrap over it. You want this defrosted, and so mine has already been out, and well, it was out. I just got it the other day, so I didn't bother freezing it. But you can defrost meat in the microwave if you want to. So I'm just using the plastic wrap and kind of with my fingers, just tearing a hole in it and pouring the contents over the pan. And let's talk about the pan real quick. I'm using a 9x9 pan. You can use a pie dish or something like that. But you want something that'll give you enough room to work with. And the nice thing about this particular meatloaf recipe is we get to do it all in the pan. And that will help minimize mess. So the plastic you're hearing is the plastic bags that the meat comes in. And I'm going to now take the packaging off of meat number 2. And we're going to get it out. And the other thing you'll want to feel for when dealing with these packages, and doubly so if you're dealing with frozen meat, is there is a plastic protective piece at the bottom of the tray. And you don't want to get that into your pan. So make sure and it can be harder to feel if your meat is frozen. So make sure you are feeling for that. All right, I'm going to wash my hands again because I've just come in contact with raw meat and I don't know what surface I'm going to touch next. So I want to be super safe and there's nothing lost by doing that. So the meat is kind of in 2 chunks here. I'm just going to use my hand to break it up slightly. But it's all going to get mixed in the end, so I'm not going to worry about being too precise. And you can also use things like latex gloves if you want. I personally, as somebody with no sight, I'm not a fan of having my hands restricted in any way, shape, or form, and gloves will do that, and they'll just distort how things feel, and I'd rather have my clean hands and be able to feel everything that I am doing. Okay, so I'm breaking this up. Now let's talk about the onions. So I'm cheating and I'm going to use pre-chopped onions. So you can chop a regular onion if you so desire. I recommend you cut it in half first because it'll be a lot easier to cut. And then I like to cut the skins off next, so that way I'm just dealing with the actual onion itself. And you want to have a good knife. I recommend having the knife go in between like 2 fingers so you can safely use it without ever cutting yourself. And you'll want to, just cut into the onion and then just keep cutting it into small pieces. There are also various kitchen aids you can get, both designed for the blind and not, from the simple choppers that you can use to kind of press down and chop things that way to the more advanced salad shooters or kitchen aids. So there are a lot of tools out there to help you cut. Or if you're not dealing with onions on a regular basis, you might not mind just spending an extra $1 and buying a container of pre-chopped onions. So these are from Walmart and that I've got in my hand here. You can hear them. And what you just heard was me ripping the plastic tab off the side. And then all I need to do is lift up the lid. The lid has a plastic little piece on it and the container has a separate plastic piece. And now I'm just going to take this container and pour right over the pan. So before I move on to the bread, this is an opportune time for anybody who has any questions, and just say your name and wait to be acknowledged by either myself or George. Any questions on what I've done so far?
This is
No,
Sonia.
you're good.
Sonia.
So the stove is not on yet, right?
I did preheat the oven.
Oh, oven. It's going to go in the oven. Duh.
Yes, it's going to go in the oven. Now, I will talk about what to do in a little bit if you don't feel safe, if you don't want to work around a hot oven.
Okay. All right.
So I will address that. You're welcome. Anybody else? Bridget.
Yes, you just put, I'm not sure the amount of bread. You just tear the bread up untoasted and put it in the meatloaf.
I have not gotten to the bread yet. I'm about to do that.
All right.
I've just
Thank
done
you.
the meat and the onions so far. Yep.
This is Terry.
Yes.
How much onion did you say you were using? And you're not measuring it out? You're just guessing or what?
I'm not measuring it out. I'm using the entire container, so it's like an 8-ounce container of chopped onions. And it's gonna, even if you're not an onion lover, it's all gonna cook into the thing anyway. But if the nice thing about the container, if you don't want to use the entire amount of onions, it's a resealable container, so you can take out the amount you, if you want to do a precise measurement, you can definitely by all means do that and put the rest back in your refrigerator if you want to.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. All right. Anybody else? Hearing none, I'm going to wash
Wait,
my
this
hands.
is
Yes, Gail,
this
I
is
think.
Gail. Yeah, I had a
Yep.
question. I've always had a hard time chopping the onions. What do you think is the easiest way? Just buying them pre-chopped then,
Yes, that is the easiest.
or what is the easiest thing to use? KitchenAid. Besides that,
KitchenAids
that
are easier. Be in the sun. I mean, you still have to chop them, but you don't have to chop them real fine. You just have to chop them small enough to where they'll fit into your KitchenAid. Of course, there's gonna be some factors like the size of the onion, things like that. You know, if you get a whole onion, you get the option of, do you want a yellow onion, a red onion, a white onion, a sweet onion, that type of thing. And KitchenAid, like salad shooters, are really good because they don't have sharp blades, and so you just need to cut the onion well enough so that it'll fit in the salad shooter, and then you can let it do the more fine chopping, and you can use whatever cone you want. But a food processor will do the trick, and you can just put it in there, and it really depends on how comfortable you are with using a knife. If you do want to use a knife, there are definitely plenty of adaptive aids out there to help you should you desire. There are like guide knives, there are like cutting gloves that you can use. There are a lot of different options out there, but the easiest is to just buy the things chopped if you want chopped onions. Now, if you're wanting something that requires like onion rings, that's a whole nother ball game altogether, but for chopped onions, just buy the container and you're good to go. I don't know of any, other than maybe it being a little bit more expensive, I don't know of any disadvantage to doing that.
This is Sonia.
Yes.
When you were spraying the pan, did you like also spread it around the sides of the pan, or did it just automatically go, or how did you do that?
Actually, I should do that. I should make sure some does get on the sides. Thanks for reminding me, because I sometimes forget. But I'm just going to kind of put a little bit on the side of the pan, because we do want to do that as well for sure. So,
So this is Sonia.
yep.
So an alternative could be like butter, right, or oil, or something if you don't have pan, or
It could be. I'd be a little bit. I mean, oil is going to. Butter and oil, of course, are a little bit more of like cooking agents. So, like, if you're going to use either one, especially, I'd use a very, very tiny amount. And I must admit, though, I've never used either one as a substitute for like actual cooking spray. So, for meat, at least for baking, that's a whole nother matter altogether. And I would use butter more than I'd use oil, because they're going to cook the food more so than... Because what you want is to keep the things from sticking to the pan. You don't want it to be doing extra cooking, and so you really have to be careful with those. But if you have...
This is Liz.
Yes.
If I'm out of like a spray, I'll take like a paper towel and get it a little damp and put just a little tiny bit of like my canola oil on it and then rub that
Right.
around on the inside, and that works just as well as spray.
Yep. But just a tiny amount, because the idea
Right.
is that you want it to not stick. You want it to not stick. You don't want it to cook the food. So
Right. I pour it on the paper. Get the paper towel wet and then
yeah.
put the paper towel on top and flip the bottle once. So you just got a tiny bit.
Yep. All right. Perfect. Anybody else? All right, hearing none, I'm going to now get back to washing my hands because I started to do that and I didn't want to have the water running and I don't want to be touching my phone with oniony hands. So let's talk about the bread. So you have several options. The recipe technically calls for 2 heels of bread, but you can just use 2 pieces of bread. You can also use breadcrumbs, and the amount of breadcrumbs you use will just depend on how crispy you want it. What I really have liked for this recipe is hamburger buns. And I feel like they just work real well texturally for this recipe. And I will just take 2 complete hamburger buns and crumble them up. So that is what I'm doing right now. They come in a package with a twist tie. And I'm going to take 2 out. I could just use 1 if I wanted to, but 2 works well. And I'm now going to kind of, I don't know how to describe how, just twisting the packaging around and putting the tie back on and twisting it on. If you're not good with twist ties, clothespins are a good substitute. And so now we're going to take these buns over to the pan, and I'm going to just tear them off bit by bit. These are the sesame seed buns. I'm just going to crumble them with my hands, and I'll come back and mix in the ingredients in a second. But and you could also put these through a food processor if you want, if you have one. And the thing I discovered about that when trying to do that, it makes it a very... It changed the meatloaf to where it was like it came out a lot more crisp, whereas I found that if I just did it by hand, then the breading didn't get so crisp. It kind of had a bit more of a fluffier feel to it, so it wasn't like you were eating a crispy meatloaf, but you still had the breading in there. So that's been kind of my experience. And if you can use any kind of bread you want, wheat bread, white bread, anything that you really want to use. Like I said, I'm using hamburger buns, and I'm just crumbling it over the pan. And then I'm going to just kind of use my hands to mix it all together, and I can feel as I'm going along what pieces of bread did not get crumbled enough, and so I'm going to crumble them more as I am mixing. Next, we're going to do the eggs, and by the way, if you want to do some of these in reverse order, like you could do the bread and then the onions, whatever you want to do. It really doesn't matter. You probably want to do your liquids last, but I'm going to just make sure this is nicely crumbled. Okay. So, let's talk about eggs. There are 2 ways you can handle the eggs. If you're really confident with cracking eggs, then you can do this directly over the pan. If you're not comfortable with cracking eggs, then you might prefer a separate bowl. And the reason for this is that way you can feel around in the bowl for eggshells, which we do not want in our meatloaf. So again, I'm going to wash up because I've been dealing with raw meat. I'm going around my kitchen, and as blind people, we are going to be touching more things whether we realize it or not. So, I've got a carton of eggs here. They come in your standard carton of eggs. I'm going to take 2 out, and then we're going to go over to the pan. And I'm going to crack each egg. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the side of the pan that is narrowest. So, egg number 1, and I like to crack it towards the edge of the egg. And that way I have very little shell that I have to work with. Okay, there's egg number 1. It's, of course, got the liquid inside. I actually did have somebody once who did not know that there was... They'd only ever seen hard-boiled eggs. They'd never seen a raw egg, so they honestly did not know that it was liquid inside. So I'm going to throw these eggshells in the garbage. Some places will let you put them in garbage disposals, some will not. And our apartment complex does not want you to do that, so they are going into the garbage, the eggshells, that is. So what we're doing with the eggs is we're kind of mixing this into the mixture now, so it will all stick together. And then we're going to get to one of my favorite parts, the ketchup. So we're kind of just mixing, and then we're going to kind of press down a little bit. I'm not going to do too thorough of a job because ultimately we're going to do our final mixing part when we get to the ketchup. But this is just to kind of spread things around throughout the pan. Alright, so I've got a bit of an uneven mixture at the moment, but that's okay. Now we're going to get to the first part of the recipe that's actually really involved a measuring cup, unless you want to measure out your onions, of course. That's the ketchup. It calls for a 1/3 cup of ketchup. I like to give my meatloaf a little bit more flavor, and so I will use a 1/2 cup of ketchup just to ensure that we actually get a full flavored meatloaf. So as you can undoubtedly tell, I'm washing my hands. Let's put these eggs up so I don't forget. And now we're going to get out my measuring cups. I have several sets of measuring cups. One of my favorites is a set that I got from Blind Mice Mart. And these come from an 1/8 cup to a 2 cup. It's a complete measuring set, but they already have the Braille on them. Now, I realize that not everybody here is able to read Braille, and that, of course, can be a challenge. But if you ever wanted a good reason why you should learn at least some basic Braille, measuring cups is one, because you can see which is your 1/2 cup, which is your whole cup. But if that's not an option, or if Braille is not on your measuring cups, you can easily find out with a standard set. All you need to do is stack them so they will go in the proper order, and then you will know which is which. So the biggest one is going to be a cup, then inside the cup will be the 1/2 cup, then the 1/3 cup, then the 4th cup. So that's how you can know your measuring cups without any labeling whatsoever. But same with your measuring spoons. Tablespoon, teaspoon, 1/2 teaspoon, and 1/4 teaspoon. That is your standard set. Now if you get a full set that goes up to the 2 cups, that's a little bit more involved, but with a standard set, that's how you can know without ever needing any kind of labeling on your measuring cups. So let's talk about the ketchup. This is the Heinz ketchup, and of course you can use any kind of ketchup you want, and there are jalapeno ketchups out there, by the way, so if you really want to add some spice to your meatloaf, you could definitely try that. The ketchup comes in like a squat bottle. It has, how to describe it, like caved-in sides. This is just your ketchup that you'd pour over burgers or whatever. Some of you even ruin fries with this stuff. The first thing you'll notice is when you take off the lid is there is a plastic sticker protecting the actual ketchup. You do not need to refrigerate it until you open it. And since we're not actually squeezing the ketchup, I've taken the lid off, and I'm going to pour the ketchup into the cup. And what you need to know is, while I'm doing this, I am holding the cup over the pan, so that if any spills, it's going to go directly into the pan, and that's going to be perfectly fine, because it'll be just a tiny bit of extra ketchup. If you have like a major spill, then you might want to maybe not use your entire 1/2 cup or whatever. And I'm just using my hand to kind of feel to the top to make sure it is indeed a full cup. This cup has a spout, so it can kind of squeeze in a tad bit more. And I'm just now pouring the cup over the pan. And now I'm going to move the cup to the sink, and I'm going to use my hands to mix all this up. And then we're going to add in our salt and pepper. And so now is a good time to ask any questions. Remember to say your name and wait to be acknowledged. Hearing none, we will continue on then. So I'm just kind of moving the ketchup all around. Now, before I do fully flatten this out, I'm going to go ahead and add in my salt and pepper. So that way I can just mix it all in. So I'm going to wash up again because I'm going to go touching my salt shaker next. And I don't want to get ketchup and this mixture on my hands while doing that. So alright, so salt you do want to really be careful with. You don't need to over salt it. You just want a tiny bit for some flavoring. So let's see, salt shaker, where did you go? There you are. I find if I talk to my things when I'm missing them, they do tend to come. So I'm just using a little bit of sea salt here, and salt shakers kind of come in all forms. Mine is one that I got from the store. I have the lid kind of like half open, so a little bit will come out. And I'm just kind of guesstimating how much to use. Okay, that's good for that. Pepper, I'm going to be even more careful with, because if you use too much, it gets to be spicy. And if you want a spicy meatloaf, that's fine, but make sure you have enough liquid to compensate for that, otherwise it can turn out dry. Okay, that should be enough pepper.
And Herbie, you say you put the ketchup all over the meat or just on top?
All over.
Okay.
So we're mixing it. You're going to use your hands to mix it all up. So guys, if you were told not to play with your food as a kid, those rules are going out the window now, because we are playing with our food. We're getting messy. And so we're mixing this all up with our hands. Now, you don't want to eat this, obviously, so it's not that kind of playing with our food, but we are playing with our food. I do apologize, parents. I'm undoing your work of countless generations, but so now I'm just mixing it all into the mixture, and now I'm going to kind of flatten it out with my hands. And I'm going to kind of make sure it's all even. Now let's
It's okay. It's okay to play with raw food. Just don't play with cooked food.
Okay, good to know. All right, but make sure you eat the cooked food, but you play with the raw food. So now let's talk about the oven. I prefer to preheat my oven. It's set to about 375, but not everybody wants to do that because they don't want to be, they're afraid they might get too hot standing by it or whatever. I just don't honestly feel it myself, so I don't notice it. So if you don't want to preheat your oven, or you're concerned about putting things into a hot oven, that is fine. Instead, don't preheat the oven in that case. Just factor in, when you set your timer, how much time your oven takes to preheat. So if it takes 5 minutes, we're going to set our timer for 40 minutes, but if your oven needs preheating, make it 45 minutes, maybe even make it 48 minutes, just to give a little bit of extra time, just to be on the safe side. So that's the thing you just need to know if you do not want to preheat your oven. Okay, so I think I've gotten this about as even as it can go. Seeing some stuff that's trying to creep up the sides here. And there you go. So what have I taught you guys? Well, I've taught you that you can get pre-chopped veggies. I've taught you how to identify some meats. I've taught you how to identify measuring cups. I've taught you how to crack an egg and how to look for eggshells. So why am I saying this? Because this doesn't apply just to meatloaf. It applies to a lot of things, so just try to store these techniques away if you are new to cooking. All right, I'm going to wash my hands one more time. Now we're going to put this bad boy in the oven. So a question has come up in other places I've been about moving the oven rack and whether you should or should not. And I understand lately the teaching is that you should. Well, I'm perhaps too old school, I guess, but I do not believe or recommend that. Because, and the argument I give, it's like doing mobility. You have, a lot of times, you learn something by landmarks. You know exactly where things are at all times, and if they get moved, it's going to throw you off. And I see the whole oven rack issue the exact same way. If you want an oven rack that's a constant, kind of like in math, you got a constant x, for instance. You know where it's going to be at all times. Actually, you don't, but well, unless you know algebra. And so you want a stable thing that's in one place. You don't want the uncertainty factor with the oven rack of it now being out of the oven. You've got a potentially wobbly rack, so things can be more unstable. And you also have to deal with an oven mitt in one hand while dealing with your pan in the other. So by not moving the oven rack and by learning where it is ahead of time, I can now just open my oven door, take my pan, and just move down till I feel it touching the rack, slide it back, and close the oven. All right, for anybody that has Google devices, I will be talking to my device for just a second. Hey Google, set timer for 40 minutes.
Okay, 40 minutes. Starting now.
And I may give it a couple minutes extra longer, but so that's that for the meatloaf. Okay, so before we go on to the mashed potatoes, we'll start with any questions. And George, we'll start with you if you have any.
Yeah, so you did not cover the pan with foil. You just left it
No.
open, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And it is a loaf pan or just, I don't know if we discussed what size pan.
It's a 9x9 pan that I'm using, or you can use a loaf pan. But I use a 9x9 for this recipe. But I've also used like the larger pie dishes as well when I had one in the past. Not the smaller one, like the, you know what I mean, like the one for a larger pie that has some deep sides on it.
Uh-huh.
But I'm using a 9x9 for this one.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
This is Sandhya.
Yes.
If you wanted to, like, I mean, I know it'll affect the cooking time, I'm sure. But like, if you wanted to add, like, I don't know, like other, well, I guess it wouldn't be meatloaf anymore, but like other vegetables or mushrooms or whatever, can we throw that in there too?
You could. Easier things to throw in that would not affect the cooking time that would still taste good is like garlic, either the fresh stuff or garlic powder. You could mix in mushrooms. I'd have them minced, obviously. And I wouldn't overload it too much. And that's where you could also use Google as, cooking guide too. If you're unsure, you could probably look for meatloaf and mushroom gravy type recipe, for instance. And that may be something you'd want to do is make like a mushroom gravy that would go on top of the meatloaf rather than cooking it in, if that makes sense.
Okay, this is Sandhya. One more question.
Yep.
And this is Jordan. I guess it goes by your preference, your taste. If you want to, I know some people use like tomato sauce or tomato paste if they want like a sort of like a red gravy type baked spread of meatloaf or not. But I just a personal preference.
Yep. All right, and Sandhya, your second question.
The second question, can you go over the bread? What effect does the bread have? You put more bread, it becomes crispy. Is that what you said? Or don't mash?
The more bread you put in, the crispier you're gonna have. Like you're gonna have an outer crispy layer. And the bread is designed to be like a binding agent as well as, like affecting taste. But yeah, if you use too much bread, it's gonna become, you could have more bread than, a bread type, crispier type substance if you overdo the bread. And of course, the type of bread you're going to use is also going to affect that. Breadcrumbs are definitely going to make a more crispier meatloaf, for instance, than the hamburger buns that I used. Or if you toasted the bread, that's also going to make it crispier. So it kind of depends on what. But the other thing you need to keep in mind too is the bread is also going to absorb the liquid. So how much liquid do you want to absorb? How much do you want a drier meatloaf, or do you want a more moist and tender meatloaf? So it's kind of, what are you going for?
This is Liz.
Right, Liz.
For your meat and like your eggs, do you let them come closer to room temperature, or do you work with them cold?
I work with them cold. I
That
did
affects
have them.
cooking time.
Right, I don't work with them frozen, I work with them cold. And in this case, they already had a few minutes to sit out because I was getting things ready before the call started. So, but I will work with them cold, but not frozen. And if you're working from something with frozen, that definitely will affect your cooking time as well too. But it's also going to be harder to work with.
Yeah, for frozen, like small packages of meat, if you put them in the refrigerator overnight, they really do get thawed. I found that if they're not so cold, like when they first come out of the fridge, but a little bit closer to room temperature, both eggs and meat and vegetables, they cook faster and
Right,
they taste better because they're not being cooked for so long, and that gives
right.
them they keep the flavor better.
All right, very good.
This is Gail.
Yes, Gail.
I had you said something. You said don't do this or don't use this or it'll come out dry. And it wasn't the bread. It was another comment you made. I don't know if it was the salt or pepper, but do
I
you remember
said the
what you were?
salt. If you use too much salt or too much pepper, it's going to come out either too salty or too spicy, especially if it's like red pepper.
Oh, that was the comment. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
This is
Well,
Ned.
Yes, Ned.
Yeah, something that I've added when I've done meatloaf for flavor is I'll put maybe a couple of strips of bacon across the top while it's baking, and so that drips into the meatloaf.
All right. Probably makes it a little bit more greasier too, but excellent.
It just adds the bacon flavor. So yeah.
All right. I've heard of bacon meatloaf. That's never honestly appealed to me, even back when I did eat bacon. All right. Who else?
This is Liz again.
All right. Before we go to Liz, let's check to see if we have any more first time people that have not spoken yet. Hearing none, go ahead, Liz.
I used to use like pecani sauce instead of ketchup. So what do you think about that? Does that change
I
much?
honestly don't even know what a connie sauce is, so
Picante, like paste
a
picante
conti.
sauce?
I
Yeah.
thought you said okay. I mean that's gonna affect the flavor, for sure.
Yeah, make it spicy.
Yep. Just again, who are you cooking for? Are you cooking for yourself? Are you cooking for other family members? If you're or friends, do they like spicy? Do you want them to come back to your house if they don't like spicy? That type of thing. There's just so many things to take into consideration. So,
Right.
all right. Anybody else? So the noise you're hearing right now in the background is my kitchen fan. The oven is starting to get a little bit hot, and plus I'm about to start mashed potatoes, which is definitely going to make the kitchen a lot steamier. And sometimes we've had issues with our smoke alarm going off. Do not worry, the house is not on fire should that happen. Okay, so I've got a pot here. I've got two different types of pots. The pots I really like for mashed potatoes and for most things is one that I have that has a really long handle because it's a lot easier to find, and that is especially important when dealing with a hot stove. I'm going to fill it up with water. And potatoes, I mean, we could have a call. I don't think we've done this. We could have a call just on the different ways you can do potatoes: mashed, baked, fried, boiled, in casseroles, hash browns. I'm using filtered water. Not that it matters too much, but hey, less things that has to boil out of the thing. And we're going to make this at a really good level because I want to make sure that the potatoes cover the water covers the potatoes. So this is going to be filled almost to the top. So what we're going to do here most people will tell you, okay, get the water boiling and put the potatoes in. But you really don't need to do it that way, and it just makes things a little bit more unsafe. Yeah, it'll make things take a little bit longer. But quite frankly, when it comes to potatoes, when it comes to pasta, you don't need to do that. Just get your water ready or get the potatoes ready, then put the water in, then put it on the stove, and then get your stove going. This way, you don't need to be feeling around for a boiling pot of water. So that is what I highly recommend, and believe me, this has been news to some people that they could try it that way. And so I am re-emphasizing that. So I'm getting out a cutting board. Mashed potatoes, again, you can cheat and get like the instant mashed and all that. No, sorry, I limit my cheating to some things, but potatoes, wives, people and things like that, no. So, I'm going to get out my potatoes. The potatoes come in a bag with a twist tie. I've got the red potatoes, or you can use regular baking potatoes. And these red potatoes are massive. And I don't recommend, you don't want to refrigerate your potatoes, by the way, because they will turn to sugar. But if you live in an area like Houston, you do want them, you're better off having them up high where they're not going to be as likely to be eaten by pests. So I'm going to take out, I think 6 potatoes that will do the trick. And what we're going to do is get one more out. I'm going to set them aside here. And we're going to wash them first, and then we're going to cut them. But what we need for mashed potatoes, cutting is not as big of a deal as you might think. Because, well, I'll explain why in a minute. So there's potato number 1, and it's going on the cutting board. Let's grab a couple more potatoes here and just run them under the water so we get the dirt off them. You always want to wash your vegetables. And voila, they're going onto the cutting board. And last 2 washed. So I've got a set of actual knives that are not butter knives. And I like to use what I think of as a paring knife. It has a flat blade that is not really sharp, but will cut through the potatoes easily enough. If I can find the thing. There it is. And I'm not aiming for chopping the potatoes, I'm just aiming them for cutting them in circles so that way they will easily boil. So I'm cutting each potato in half and then just cutting them into smaller chunks from there. I could even go a step further and cut them in half if I want, some of these circles. And I think I will do that, so I'm just laying them down flat. And the idea is so that they will boil quickly. The smaller you cut them, the quicker they will boil. And then the easier they will be for mashing. And so we want them small enough to where... And one thing I should have done, which does work well, is I could have gotten these ready first so they were sitting in the pot ready to go, and then they have more time to soften up. So I'm kind of cutting them into like wedge type shapes and not trying to be terribly precise or anything like that, just so they're going to be small pieces. Okay, now as they're cutting, I don't want an overcrowded cutting board, so I'm going to start plopping them in the water, except I'm missing the water and putting them on the stove. That's not good because I put the pot over here. Okay, let's try that. That will be much more effective. Hey, another good reason why I'm glad I'm not using a boiling pot of water, because I did overshoot my pot. But I'm not having to worry about steam and vapor coming from the pot. So I can easily fix my mistake and no injuries. And that's always a good thing. We want to be safe in the kitchen as much as we possibly can. I will tell you I've had more issues with burning myself with water vapor than oil, but yeah.
This is Terry.
Yes, Terry.
Do you want to talk, maybe not, but do you want to talk a little bit about techniques for cutting, and knife safety and that kind of thing?
All right, so I kind of did touch on this earlier. So I'm using my fingers as a guide, and I create a space for the knife to go in between, like, my fingers. And I'm holding my arms at an angle so that way I can't, I'm not going to cut myself. And I'm only cutting the space in between my fingers. This is really interesting because I'm so used to cutting now. I've done this for over 20 years that half the time I don't even think about what I'm doing. I just do it. And so it's something you do on a weekly basis, and you just get used to it. So I'm kind of creating a gap with my fingers and just putting the knife in between. Again, you can use KitchenAids and whatever to do this too.
But so you don't curl any of your fingers so they're out of the way of the knife blade?
They're not. The knife blade is not actually touching my fingers. Picture like your fingers as a tunnel. So like you've got your fingers, you've got your hand, your fingers holding the item you're cutting. Your hand is like the roof, and your knife is going into the gap that is created by your fingers. So you've got a width, a space of how much you want to cut. Does that make any sense at all?
No, but that's okay. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Because you don't want to cut like on the outside of your fingers. So it's.
This is Liz.
Yes.
Like a bridge where your thumb's on one side and your forefingers are on the other side, so the knife goes underneath between your fingers.
Yes.
Okay, I'd have to try it.
Yeah, we'll give it a try.
Okay.
Yep. Start with something safe like a stick of butter and a butter knife. That way. Yes.
Are you gonna peel the potatoes, or
no?
That's it.
I do not peel potatoes. It is not because I don't know how. It's because they taste just fine with the skin on them. But that is for those that do want to peel their potatoes. The easiest way is with a potato peeler. It's kind of like a blade attached to a handle, and what you want to do is thoroughly wash your potatoes so that way the skin will come off, and that's how you can peel them. I personally don't do it because I have no problems with the skin, and also that's where the nutrients, you're just getting starch anyway. You're not getting any nutrients from the potatoes. So no matter what it is, I never peel potatoes. I will do fries with the skin on. I will do garlic mashed with the skin on. Baked potato obviously has the skin on, but I do it all with the skin. And that's another reason why I guess I just don't do instant potatoes, because those generally are not going to have the skin. Plus, they will have a lot more salt than they actually need, usually.
This is Vincent.
Yes, Vincent.
So, do you remove the eyes from the potatoes?
Depending on how you could try to, and if depending on the age of the potatoes is going to depend on how easy that is. If I will try to remove them as I notice them, and so it really just depends. If you can notice them, then by all means try to remove them, but otherwise it's not a big deal.
All right. So because I had heard that it modifies the taste. I don't know if that's a mother's tale or something.
All right, and George. George?
Okay, I'm sorry. I had to find my unmute button. Did you add anything to the water? Or you just boiling the water? You just gonna drop the potatoes in there?
Yep, I could add in some garlic powder now. I was going to actually just add in some regular garlic in a little bit. But I will add in some regular garlic powder now, so it'll... we'll have like multiple layers of garlic here for the potatoes. But if you want to add anything ahead of time, you can, like garlic powder like I'm doing, or some salt and pepper. And, okay, now that they're all
This is Ned.
Yes.
How much garlic did you put in the water?
I just poured a lot of garlic powder in the water. I didn't do any precise measurement. These types of things are based on your preference and what you would like to have. So if you don't want it very garlicky, I just put a tiny bit in. If you want it super garlicky, I put in a lot. And I've just turned the stove to high, and now I'm going to find my lid and cover the pot in a way that will let it boil. And we do want to let these boil, because otherwise, with the pot covered, otherwise water will go everywhere. All right, who else has questions?
This is George. How many potatoes you say you use? I know you say you use red potatoes.
I used about 6 potatoes, but you can use 4 to 6.
Yeah, that's the little small ones, correct? Not like the big Irish potatoes.
Yeah, I did use the bigger ones,
but you did use the big ones. Okay.
But these are going to last several days. It's not going to be just for one like serving. So, again, too, what are you kind of trying to do? Do you want some that'll last a while, or do you just want it for one meal? And that's also going to depend on how many you do.
Okay.
All right. I probably could have used 4 and been just fine with these, but I overestimated. That's fine. Okay, who else? So things are a little quieter now as I'm outside of my kitchen. I'm just letting the water boil, and then I'll come back and check on it. I was hoping to be able to get the already peeled garlic, because that's a lot easier to work with. But instead, they could only give me the garlic bulbs, so I'm going to have to go peel them. But if you can find already peeled garlic, that's something else that will make your whole life a whole lot easier, because it's already divided up into cloves, it's already peeled. You just have to put it in something or mash it first with a garlic press. Because we're putting the garlic in water, we won't need to mash it with the garlic press. I'll just need to get the peel off of it. So I guess you can say it has a strong appeal. And that's what we will be doing with that.
And this is George. Guys, he had talked about earlier, especially for those of you who want to peel your potatoes. Yes, you can. I don't know if you ever have seen a potato peeler. It's like a little tool. It's not that big. It's probably like about maybe, I'll say 4 inches in length, maybe
Yep.
5. I'm not exactly sure. And it's got like a little slit that goes down one part, which is the blade. And you basically just going to like scrape the potato like from the top to the bottom. That helps peel the potato. If you are not experienced with using a knife to peel a potato, like I can do both. I can use a potato peeler, or sometimes I use a knife if I'm making French fries, if I'm going to peel them.
Yep. All right. So what other questions do we have? First of all,
This is Kelsey.
Kelsey, and then somebody else. I heard you. We'll get to you after Kelsey.
Okay, my question is for the meatloaf, if someone doesn't really like ketchup, what else can you substitute for that?
Well, we talked about picante sauce earlier. You could just use it kind of depends on really what kind of flavor you're looking for. You can always Google. You may want to find a different recipe altogether. You could use tomato sauce, or you can always Google meatloaf recipes and look for one that does not call ketchup. So, because I should point out that there are a lot of meatloaf recipes out there. This is just one out of a lot you will come across. So, some meatloafs will use like a gravy instead of a ketchup. So you can always make the meatloaf without any kind of sauce and just create make a separate gravy. Or I talked about a mushroom gravy, or you could, I guess, try to do like a beef gravy or just a standard gravy mix. So there's definitely a few alternatives you could look into, and like I said, that's where you might want to really use Google is your friend when it comes to recipes. Now, some of the recipe sites can be a little bit fun to read, and reader mode on your phone can be a friend. I recommend a computer. You're going to have a little bit of an easier time for recipe websites. You can also get recipes from your A-ladies and whatnot too. Those are usually more of the complex recipes. So it's a good idea to look at different recipes and figure out which one you want to try.
Mr. George, one good thing, guys, too, like if you want to Google particular recipes where they got the different steps listed, and if you have one of the smart, Google devices, you could tell it read one step at a time and pause it while you going through whatever the instructions were. And then you could
Yep.
tell it resume, and it'll give you the next step. That way, you're still
Yep.
hands free.
This is
This is
Terry.
Vincent.
All right, hold on. So who was before? Somebody else had spoken with when Kelsey
I
did.
think
So
it
who
was
was?
Vincent that was right after Kelsey.
Okay, then Vincent, then Terry.
Yes, I was just going to mention that the NFB Newsline has a section with recipes if you subscribe to the NFB Newsline.
That is a very good point, and the advantage with those is you won't have to worry about ads. I need to look into that myself. So thank you for that very important tip, there, Vincent. All right, and now Terry.
Um, I not a big fan of ketchup, but if I put ketchup in there, I will also add some Worcestershire sauce.
There you go.
I kind of like that. And also, I'm not good at peeling potatoes, but so what I will do sometimes is use I have a battery operated vegetable peeler and a hand operated vegetable peeler, and you put the potato on top of these prongs, and it it rotates around, and there's a blade that then peels the potato for you, so you don't have to do it. You just have to be careful, as you do if you're going to peel them by hand with a knife or a peeler, that you don't peel too much off of the potato, or you're going to not have as much potato as you might like.
Yep. Very good tips there, Terry. All right. I did not know about the battery operated peelers, but again, like I said, I don't peel my potatoes anyway, so that would be why. All right. Who else?
You give me an idea, Herbie. This is short because, yeah, I've actually had cut potatoes into French fries before, but I've always peeled them. I didn't had no thought about that the vitamins and stuff are inside the peeling. So I might try that next time.
Yep. I mean, of
When I
course,
make
you're still
homemade French
frying them.
fries.
Let's make no mistake. You're still frying it, but yeah, you're gonna have the skin is the part that has all the vitamins. Oh, shut up.
There's your smoke detector.
Yep. But the skin is what will have all the vitamins. So when a smoke detector goes off like this, we can just nicely go over to it, and since we're on a call, I won't say my choice words to it, but wave the towel, and that usually shuts it up. All right. So, yeah, but that's why I don't peel the potatoes, is because the skin is the part that has the nutrients, so you're just having pure starch, which, if I'm making potatoes seem too healthy with the skin on them, okay, but the way I see it, why not have the unhealthy parts with the healthy parts and it still tastes good? So I can tell that my potatoes are boiling by the simple fact that I can feel the pot lid, the pot handle, I'm sorry, vibrating. And, yeah, there's no fire. You don't need to go off like that. But, you got meatloaf and potatoes cooking. So what I can do, though, is if I want to feel what the potatoes feel like in the water, I'll deal with that in a second. I can just carefully take off the lid, and I'm going to do it in a way that will move the lid away from me so the steam won't touch me, and I can just use a spoon to kind of stir down into the bottom a little bit. Okay, we still got a long way to go, but I'm going to have the lid so that way it'll vent some of the water. But so yeah, you can hear I've got all the noise going on, the smoke alarm, the fan, but I can feel the pot bubbling and through because the handle is vibrating. And if I turn the fan off, I think you'll be able to hear it too. Give me just a second.
Somebody may ask, how long will you boil them for? Do you set a timer, or you just go by sound or just from experience, you know how long to boil them for?
Yeah, you're probably looking at around 20 minutes, but I go by sound, I go by experience. No, you can just take one out with a fork, and if it feels soft enough, then you know it's probably ready to be mashed. And so, but yeah, I'd say around 20 to 30 minutes, but it really depends just on, I just go by how it actually feels. And then the garlic I'll add in towards the end, because I don't really want to overcook the garlic. But we're going to get to that in just a second here. I want to see if we have any more questions before we go talking garlic. So, now, of course, you can, if you don't want, the garlic is just an optional part. I'm adding in the garlic to give the mashed potatoes flavor. You can choose not to use garlic if you so desire. So but it won't affect the rest of everything else. But now we will talk garlic. So if you know of anybody who's a vampire, they will not be interested in this part. I'm going to...
Do you add any butter or margarine?
I do that last.
Okay.
So I will do that during the mashing process. And I will add in butter. So... I probably could add in a little bit now just to help them soften up a tiny bit, but so when you get the regular garlic cloves, it comes in a net bag with 3 cloves in it. You can also buy jars of minced garlic as another alternative. I gotta tell you, I'm not a big fan of the minced garlic myself because it has a different flavor and a different texture to it, so I just don't really like to deal with it myself, but you can. So I'm going to wash the garlic, not because so much it needs it, it'll just help loosen the outer leaves protecting the garlic so I can get to them easier. And I'm now going to just kind of tear this bulb apart, and the garlics of course come in these little cloves, so they're the cloves are like a wedge shape. And the other thing too is, notice my smoke alarm has not been going off because what I did is I let the water, like I've created a vent with the lid, so it's kind of on the pot slanted, so that the water will kind of have a chance to escape instead of just building up pressure inside the pot. So, and I have the lid, the slanted part of the lid, facing upwards away from me, so it's not going to splatter me. So, and okay,
Terry,
yes.
I have a couple of pots that have on one side of the lids they have holes in them for just that purpose, and also when you go to pour the water out of the pot to drain, in this case the potatoes, or if you were draining pasta, you don't have to take the lid off. You just, assuming that you've got it screwed on tightly, that is. I've forgotten to do that and had everything end up in the sink.
Yeah, I could. Yep.
But if you have the lid screwed on tight, you just turn it upside down. I use oven mitts or some kind of mitts to do that. And the water pours out of the holes, but while they're cooking, it also keeps the steam from building up as well.
That'd be a very useful pot to have, I must admit.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's the type of appliance I'm a lot more interested in than, having my A-lady start my oven. I just got to tell you, yes, I do like technology, but I think there's some things it's not good for blind people, and I think smart devices is... I'm not against smart devices, I just want, like I said, I want to make sure I have a way of controlling my smart device that does not involve the internet. So I don't want to be reliant on Siri and because they make them work through the internet, not through your home network, and that is really...
Okay, that answers the question if you're using an electric oven and not a gas.
Yes, I'm using all electric here. Gas is perfectly safe to use. It just takes things a little bit quicker, and the heat can be a little bit hotter. And I have used gas in the past, but I am using all electric here.
This is Liz.
Yes.
Which kind of pot do you work with for your boiling your potatoes? Because I've got both the stainless steel and the nonstick with those holes in the lid that are so wonderful.
I have the stainless steel ones. I wish I had the holy lids, but
Oh, they're wonderful.
so I'm gathering. All right. If anybody has any links to those, I'd be very interested, or know where you get them from. Yep.
I got my first one from the Texas Workforce, the independent living lady. Once I had one of those, I've never gone back. That's what I buy now.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I would too, because I know how to use a strainer. Don't get me wrong, and we're going to talk about that. But the holy lids could definitely be a
great.
big... And even not just for... anybody, I think, would benefit from something like that, because it saves time, it saves dishes, because you've got one less implement to have to worry about. So I think it's not even... For me, I would say it's, for anybody, it could be a big deal. So I'm just kind of peeling the garlic. It's a tricky thing to do, but you just have to kind of feel for the papery things. I really, really prefer my already peeled garlic, but I can't do anything about that now other than wine. So I'll do that and call it good. But, so I'm just trying to throw these papers away as we're going along. And now I'm going to add in the garlic into the pot. And so I'm just making sure I don't gather up my knife, making sure these papers from the garlic get thrown in the garbage. And this part is, if again, you can always just put your garlic in ahead of time if you don't want to deal with a touchy, a boiling hot water pot. So I'm kind of just dropping them in. But now this is a good opportunity for me to use my spoon and see what the water level is at, if I need to add more to them or not. I can tell that I've got quite a bit here, but I'm moving the potatoes around so they don't stick to the bottom. And I'm going to turn off the fan again and see if you can hear them boiling. Can you hear that water bubbling sound?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the potatoes boiling merrily away. And,
I can definitely hear it.
excellent.
This is Madeline.
Yes.
Yes. So you put garlic in garlic powder first, and then you also add the garlic whole, the
Yep,
whole
that's how
garlic.
I do it. But you can, I mean,
Oh,
you can do whatever way you want. If you just want to deal with the garlic powder, that's perfectly fine. But, you know, I like to do a little bit of both just to kind of increase the flavor a little bit.
okay.
But that's just me.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
All right. Who else? So as I'm stirring them, you know, to try to make sure that they don't stick to the pan, I prefer metal spoon, honestly. I know it can be a bit safer to use a wooden spoon, but the thing that I do not like about wooden spoons is, I'm going to add in a little bit more water here. It's harder for me to feel what I'm doing. Hey, Google, stop. And now I can turn off the oven, which will help decrease the heat in a little bit. So I'm just taking a water glass and I'm going to just add a little bit of extra water. So I like to be able to feel what I'm doing. So even though it's a shorter handle, as a blind person, I want to be able to engage my senses as much as possible, the same way a sighted person would use their eyesight as much as they possibly can. And so anything that feels weird, I have a harder time with. And occasionally I'll use a wooden spoon if I absolutely have to, but, okay, but we're adding some more water here just to keep things from sticking, because if the water boils out too much, then we're going to have a problem. And, but I can definitely tell these are starting to soften up really nicely, so I'll give it a couple more minutes. And what are we looking at time-wise?
Right. I think it's just after 8 Central.
Okay, perfect. And is this call an hour and a half or 2 hours?
2.
2. Okay. Good.
Actually, it's 8:24.
8:24. All right. So we've been moving right along here at a pretty good pace. So with that, first of all, I also want to remind you, if you want to hear more of my cooking calls, there are several ways you can do that. They are free. They do not cost a thing. You can subscribe to the ACB community call list, and I run a call every Tuesday at 9 Central. Oh, one of the potatoes fell out of the pot. And I do that along with my host, Tori, co-host, and we've made all sorts of things. But, so that's every Tuesday at 9. To subscribe to them, just send an email to community@acb.org. It is real humans at the other end, so include your name and email address and say, please add me to the community call list. It is a Zoom link, so you can listen on that. So it's the same platform we're on right now. But in addition to that, they are also on Clubhouse. So if you are a Clubhouse user, you can just follow the ACB house. It's now a house, not a club. And follow, you'll get notified when the room opens for the cooking call. And we do take questions, of course. The calls run for about an hour and a half usually. And we do also create opportunities for other people to participate as well. You can also listen on ACB Media 5. And you can just enable the skill on your smart device, or you can download the ACB Media app on your phone. It's the only ACB app, actually, and you can listen that way. There's several other ways, too, but those are the easiest. I also do have a YouTube channel. If you look for Herbie's Cooking Corner on YouTube, it is a playlist, not a channel, because I run several playlists through that channel. You will find a lot of my archives up there. Not everything is uploaded, and I'm trying to get better about uploading more. They are audio only, but you will find quite a few of my calls. I think there's like 14 that are uploaded right now. So if you search for Herbie's Cooking Corner on YouTube, that's HERBIE, apostrophe S, and then space, then cooking, space corner, you'll see a playlist, and you can subscribe to the playlist, or you can just look at whatever fancies your interest. There is a meatloaf call that I did 2 years ago on there that's pretty similar to this one. I mean, it's the exact same recipe, so there'll be some differences. And of course, this one I will get uploaded to the iBug feed and for the podcast and YouTube, of course, too. And I'll actually be able to add it. Once it gets uploaded to YouTube, I'll actually be able to include it as part of my other playlist, so that's cool. So you can definitely listen to me cook more on that. Also, if you're on Clubhouse, there are definitely replays on there as well. So, and also on the ACB Media podcast feed, you will find a lot of my calls there as well. So there are multiple ways that you can find me. I'm going to take the meatloaf out of the oven, and I'm just going to set it on one of the back burners here. I can just feel with my hands. Yep, this definitely looks good. So I cooked it for about 40 minutes. I think you heard the Google timer go off. And now I'm going to let the potatoes cool off a minute because, whoa, that was not good. But I was moving the pot and some of the water decided to try to spill. This is why we're going to let it cool off for a second before attempting to pour the potatoes into the drainer. And this is why I'd love to definitely be able to use one of those lids. So let's talk about green beans. There's actually there's 3 different ways of doing green beans. There's fresh, there's frozen, and then there are the canned ones. I'm going to do the frozen today. I'm not going to be candid with you all. But let's start just briefly by talking about the canned green beans. Those are easy to do, or any canned vegetable this applies to, not just green beans. You simply use your can opener. I use the manual one where you put the blades on the lid and you turn the little dial until the lid pops off, or just at least comes off enough to where you can pour everything. And the nice thing about canned green beans and other canned vegetables, they already have the correct amount of water in them. So you just pour the entire contents into the pan, and then you can add anything you want, a little bit of butter, any seasoning if you want, and just let it cook for about 5 minutes or until your desired texture, depending on how mushy or crispy you want them. So cans are super simple. One of the things that you can tell with canned vegetables like the green beans versus other canned things like canned sauces is the bottom feels different than the top in most cases. So the bottom will be like this smooth surface that you cannot do anything with, whereas the top will be a more narrower edge, and you place the blades onto it, you turn the dial, and all that. There are also some canned green beans that will have the flip top on them like a soda can. And those are nice because you just pull the tab up, you pull back, and voila, the thing comes off. And you are good to go there. So you don't even have to worry about a can opener. I have trouble finding those. And part of the reason why I struggle with finding those is because I like, when I get the canned green beans, I like to get the unsalted ones rather than the salted, and then because they, well, kind of, if I want salt, I'll add in my own salt. But we get the unsalted green beans instead, and those are just a little bit better than the salted ones. But those I've never seen in the flip tops, whereas I have seen salted ones in the flip tops. Frozen is going to be a little bit easier. We're just going to take a small pot, put some water in it, put in a little bit of butter and some green beans, and let her boil for a few minutes and just stir a little bit with a spoon. And we're going to wheel drain them similar to the potatoes. So before I get into that, any questions? Nope. Okay. So, and I should also mention that, especially in the summer in Texas, this can be a little bit exhausting, so I don't cook like this every day. But because the hot kitchen can really get a bit overwhelming, let me assure you. With the green beans, you can do a pot or a pan. I've got a small pot that I'm going to use. You can also use a small skillet if you prefer. And the other thing we did not talk about, I'm sitting the wrong way, is how to know what burner to use for what. So my stove has the old-fashioned burners, and I don't have the flat top burners. I would love the flat top burners in a way just to play with, but they can be less accessible in figuring out where you're going to put things. So we don't need to overfill this pot. And I used my bigger pot on the bigger burner. It can kind of fit on the smaller burner, but it takes it a little bit longer to do things. So now the small pot can go on the smaller burner. How do you like that? And now we can take our green beans. They come in a package. It's very easy to tell just by feeling through the package that they are green beans because of the shape of green beans. They are like, tubes, basically. Kind of a tube shape. So we just plop them in the pot. And we'll do a few more. And I'm then going to add in some butter and let it go. You can use stick butter if you want unsalted. And you don't have to put in too much. You just need a little bit, but it really depends on your preference, of course. And I'm going to plop that into the water, and we'll just let it sit, and I'll kind of start to stir it around a little bit so the butter can start dissolving in the water, and it'll be spread all the way around.
This is
Yes.
Gail.
Yes, Gail.
I had a question. Aren't you using fresh green beans now?
I'm using the frozen ones.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking if you were using the fresh green beans, don't you need to wash them and cut the ends?
If you were using fresh, yes.
Okay.
You're
I,
not,
I thought
so...
you were using the fresh ones now. Okay.
Nope.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. Okay, thank you.
All right, so now we're going to deal with the potatoes, and this is one of the reasons why I really like my long... Oh, what? Somebody else have a question? Okay, so this is where I really like my long-handled pot, because I can now put my strainer over here in the sink. I'm not going to, unfortunately, one disadvantage with using a lot of potatoes is it does make the pot heavier. But I let it cool down, so it's still not, like, I could let it cool even longer. But I let it cool down to where it's a little bit safer to carry now. So now I'm pouring the water into a strainer. The strainer is a bowl with slots around the side and the bottom. And we're just going to pour all the things into there. So what I'm going to do is drain out the water. And we're going to pour the potatoes back into the pot. And then we're going to mash them. So I'm just shaking out the excess water, and I'm doing this over the sink. And you just kind of have to use your judgment on this. And but you can kind of feel the water coming out of the bottom, and so I kind of move it around from side to side. Potatoes, I'll try to move some of those around so that way more water can come out. And very good. Okay. And I can either let it cool down or just kind of, try to get even more water out, but I can shake vigorously. And out comes the water. Now we're going to take these back over to the pot, and I'm holding the sieve over the pot, and we're going to pour in. And now we're going to add in our butter. And I've got butter foil here. And we're going to cut some off with a knife, or you can use spreadable butter, whatever you want. And we're going to add it in, and then we're going to do our potato masher. So let me see what we can do here. For this, I will just use a butter knife. And going to cut off a good chunk, because, yeah, it makes it a little bit more unhealthy, I suppose, but you do want the flavor. And I'm just going to kind of break it up into smaller pieces so it'll mash a little bit easier. Okay, I think we can do a little bit more. And or if you're using spreadable butter that's in a tub, you can just use a spoon and scoop some out and plop it into the potato mixture. Okay, so let's talk about the potato masher. You can, of course, use things like blenders and things like that. I have an honest-to-God actual potato masher. It's got a handle on one side, and it's got, like, holes. It's like a flat oval bottom with holes that we press down with. So I'm going to get it out. And we're going to mash. And unfortunately, more potatoes does mean more work. So just one thing to keep in mind. But as you start mashing, it gets easier. Okay. And so I can feel as I'm going around the side of the pot which aspects of the potatoes have not gotten any feel for them yet.
This is Terry.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I missed something because I had a phone call about the garlic. What did you do with you peeled it? I know that.
I placed
But
it in the
then,
water to boil towards the end.
oh, so when you emptied the water out, didn't that also empty out the garlic?
No, because the garlic would be caught in the sieve along with the potatoes. Because I didn't use
Okay.
minced garlic. I used the garlic cloves.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them will have boiled into they had enough time to really boil anyway.
Okay. So
Is
you
that-
wouldn't ever add them in when you're adding your butter and mixing them in and mashing them that way.
You could. I mean, it probably might change the flavor a little bit, but you could do it that way if you prefer.
Oh, okay.
I
Thanks.
just figure let it all cook into the mixture. All right, very good. Who else?
This is Sonia.
Yes.
Okay, you keep talking about your long handle knife. I mean, do you just always keep it pointed to the side so you know where?
Yes. Always pointing to the side.
Okay.
And that's why I like it but I have this other pot that has like handles on both sides, and there's these really short handles that are right next to the pot, and I do not like dealing with that when it comes to boiling water because I have no protection and not as much protection. So.
Yeah, this is Sonia. I mean, how do you? I mean, I guess they tell you like 'cause I burned my hand one time because the handle got so hot.
Yep.
So do they tell you like like what kind of skillet and whatever? Or how do you know?
Well, you get to know your pots by working with them, that's for sure.
Okay, yeah,
But I know
yeah,
like my long handled pot isn't going to get as hot as the short handled pot, but I do know water vapor can come out at me if I'm not careful.
yeah. But my situation, the handle itself got really hot.
Right. Well, that's where you could use oven mitts,
Yeah.
or you might want to
Okay.
look into a different brand.
Oh yeah, it was pretty bad. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But that's where you would use oven mitts if nothing else. So. All right. And these turned out pretty good. Now the green beans are cooling off. I'll add in a tiny bit more butter and then we will call it. Actually, I can just use this entire thing and that will be good. All right. Who else? Any other final questions?
Sorry, this is Sandia. I mean, I can wait.
Yes. Nope.
Have you
Go
ever
ahead.
used like sometimes I'm not real like super strong, so sometimes like my mom has used like a cake mixer. Is that okay to mash potatoes or that
Yeah,
makes it more
whatever works
starch?
best. I've always used the masher myself, but yeah, if the masher doesn't work for you because you have limited mobility, then you need to adapt and use whatever works. And yeah, the cake mixer is a way to mash the potatoes.
Yeah, okay.
And a lot of recipes will even tell you to do it that way, so.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Yep.
This is Vincent.
Yes.
Do you add any a little bit of milk or half and half if the potatoes are not
I
soft
do
enough?
not. I do not. There's no reason to, and these turn out pretty good just with the butter added in towards the end. And you can use a whole stick of butter or whatever. And that'll give you your creamy texture, so. All right. Who else?
This is Arlene.
Yes.
Do you drain your meatloaf? Do you have like excess grease or fat in your meatloaf when it's done?
It does, but I don't drain it because, that'll come out when you're serving it. And then because a lot of that's going to get already cooked into the meatloaf anyway. So a lot of that will come out when you're serving it, and then when you dish the rest of it up, you can kind of still get some off the bottom, but a lot of it's going to remain in the pan when you get the rest. If you scoop it out the pan, that's going to help a lot more than like if you were just to pour it.
This is Arlene.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when I've made meatloaf, though, it gets so much oil, fat, grease, whatever, and it bubbles over into the oven. Then you have a real mess. Has
Yep.
that ever happened to you?
Oh yeah. That's one reason why I use a particular type of pan, because it catches a lot of that.
You mean there's a special meatloaf fat
Well,
grabbing
I
pan?
used a 9x9 pan, which has really tall sides.
Okay.
This is Ned.
Yes.
To prevent the grease spillage making a mess, I used a small cookie sheet. I put the loaf pan on the cookie sheet, and then that stays in the cookie sheet.
It does, yes. That is a very good tip, so. All right.
This is Sonia.
Mm-hmm.
How much of the butter stick did you use? Like the whole thing, half,
I use
or
the
what?
whole thing.
The whole thing. All right.
Mm.
That's why we're friends. Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
I use the whole thing.
And one last thing, you would never melt the butter ahead of time in like the
No.
microwave or anything, right?
No.
Okay.
There's no need, because if you're dealing with hot potatoes, it's gonna melt. That's
Okay.
part of the thing. So
Okay, we're in the home stretch. It's 8:48.
All right, guys. So this turned out pretty good. I need to remember. I think I probably do like a little bit less bread with this meatloaf, so I might have just been fine with one hamburger bun, but that's okay. So there you go, guys. And then we made meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and the green beans in a good amount of time.
Repeat again. What did you use to mash your potatoes with?
I used a potato masher,
Okay.
and so it's just like this oval thing on the one side hand, and it's a handle on the other hand that you press down with, and the oval has like little holes in it that kind of mash down on the potatoes.
This is Terry.
Yes.
If you have a quick minute, I have a funny potato mashing story that's real quick.
All right.
My mother often used the dreaded instant potatoes in the box, which I didn't like. But
Right.
when she did make mashed potatoes from scratch, she used a potato masher as opposed to a mixer. And so, of course, they can be a little bit lumpy. So we were at somebody's house one day, and she made mashed potatoes from scratch. And I got all excited and I said, "Oh, good lumpy mashed potatoes." And
Oh no.
unfortunately, and that was meant to be a compliment, but the cook didn't understand what I was saying, and she became highly insulted because I said that. And I said, "No, you don't understand. That's a good thing." Because I only knew the smooth mashed potatoes as the instant ones.
Well, I think it's something. I think it's something we lose sight of if we go to our next question. You grow up with something a certain way. You learn from what you see from your parents, and so that totally makes sense. All right, Sonia.
I was going to share. I have my coworkers from Idaho, and he knows a lot about potatoes. And apparently, the one thing I do not want to use instant mashed potatoes, because apparently those are like made from the worst potatoes that they could never ever sell. So, because it doesn't matter, they're going to be pulverized anyway.
Yeah.
That's what they're made of.
I mean, I
They
guess
taste
waste
fine.
not, want. I mean, I guess waste not, want not.
Right.
You know, they still have to be. They can't kill it. You know, they have to be safe. But
Yeah.
that's something to definitely know, for sure. And they know a lot about potatoes in Idaho, so.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else?
Did you season your green beans?
I did not because I have the garlic mashed, but
Oh, okay.
if I did add a little bit of butter, and I would, if I wanted to, I would have added some like garlic powder or whatever to them while they were cooking. So.
All right. Anybody else got any questions, comments, or stories?
Is anybody going to try
This
this
is
after
Terry.
today? Oh, go ahead.
Liver and almonds that you can put in your green beans at the last minute with butter, and you kind of roast them, if you will, in your microwave for just I don't know, a minute or so. So they get a little bit crispy, and those are good in frozen green beans, or even fresh green beans too.
All right.
Well, this is Sonia. I just wanted to tell you, Herbie, thank you very much for this is a lot of work, and it's just so, I hate the word inspiring, but it gives me, again, like I've said before, when George cooks stuff, and that's just one of the things I really would like to be able to do. And who knows, maybe we'll do a matchup or a future It's iBug's Life. We'll have a cooking, see if I
Yep.
learned anything.
You know, one other thing I do want to mention about cooking, though, and this is, I think, very important. Not everybody. I think one thing that does get overlooked is, not everybody. It's one thing to have the cooking, learn the cooking techniques, but I think some people are more predisposed to cooking more so than others too, and that can definitely be always a factor. Not every sighted person knows how to cook, for instance, and that doesn't. And so that means, as blind people, we want to know how to cook. We should try to, but not everybody has the skill or has different skill sets. So try to learn your limits and. Try to find an environment where you can actually practice your skills and just start with something really basic and work your way up. Don't try to maybe tackle a meatloaf your first cooking adventure, but I taught you all how to cook green beans, so I've talked about boiling water and how you can safely add the green beans to the water before you start the boiling. So even if you just start with that, it's starting somewhere.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
This is
absolutely. I would encourage everybody at least try something. These days, with the way the prices are going up on everything, when you cook stuff to help maybe you save a little change. Of course, if going out there is your choice, that's fine too. If you can swing that, but yeah, we definitely want to encourage you with all the stuff that we have cooked, and we're probably going to continue to have other things that we can fix, and we just want you guys to at least try that. So. Yes, we want to thank you, Herbie, for sharing your idea of the meatloaf, mashed potatoes, garlic mashed potatoes, at least, and some green beans. And thank everybody for tuning in. It's like 8:55 now, so we're gonna go
Yep.
ahead and wrap this up. Next week, I'm not next week. Next month, um, the topic is to be determined, to be announced. It's going to take place on if my mental calendar is working, May 25th, which will be the Thursday before the Memorial Day weekend. So stay tuned for iBug Today announcements as to what the topic will be.
Okay, party at Herbie's house. We're coming
Absolutely.
over.
Coming over and bringing my own fork.
All right.
I've
Open
been
the
hearing
door,
him eat the
Herbie.
mashed
Open the
potatoes.
door.
Yes, I'm Yeah, it's Gail. I'm coming for the
He's got
taste test.
Yes.
he's got
All right.
plenty of garlic mashed potatoes anyway.
Well, it's a little disturbing because unlike my ACB crowd, quite a few of you are in the Houston area. So I guess you could take Uber
We
and come to my home.
could. But I mean, I
I'm
absolutely
a little
love
concerned
potatoes.
now. So,
All right. Well,
all right.
thank you again. Thank you,
Thank you.
George. Thanks.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank
Herbie.
you.
It's a lot of
Thank
work
Yeah,
you,
putting all that
everybody.
together. So
Yes.
Oh
thanks.
yeah.
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Herbie. Good job.
Thank you.
Great
Thank
job.
you.
You're making us jealous eating.
Yes. Yes.
I know,
Trying
me
to
I'm
too.
teach you
I'm
the
eating.
techniques so you can do it yourself. So
Do
that's the
you
best
ever
I can
put
do.
gravy on the this is
I
Heather. Do you
don't.
put gravy on the meatloaf?
I don't because it's already flavored with the ketchup, but it can be done if you want.
Okay.
Yeah, meatloaf is one of those things. It has multiple ways. Like you say, that he did ketchup. Some people use tomato sauce or paste. Some people may even probably make a brown gravy. That's why I asked about if you had cover yours up, because I have seen somebody do cover it up, and when it's like in their way, the juices from the meat made its own like little gravy inside of there since it was
Yep.
smothered.
Oh,
But
and
it is
then
a
you could
choice.
put that
And
on the
these were
mashed
all
potatoes
suggestions,
too.
guys. When I seen the chip
Mm-hmm.
follow to the letter, but this is just like a model, something that you can start with.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
for those
beet
who don't
juice.
like ground meat, you can try the turkey ground meat if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, very good.
All right, guys. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next month.
Good
All
night.
right.
All
Thank you,
Good
Herbie.
night.
righty.
Good night.
Bye,
Thank
Good
you.
everybody.
night, everybody.
Good night.